What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all having a fantastic day, and it's time to do another little top 5, if you guys want to say it that way. So we did the top 5 mods that you should do to your E55 AMGs, or pretty much any M113 car, but the problem is you can't modify it if you don't have it, right? So I figured I'd do this video. This is not going to be in depth. I'm not going to sit here and explain to you exactly every single detail. It's just a quick little video. This is the top 5 things that you should check for when you're buying an E55 AMG, or honestly, it can kind of roll over to some of the cars, but we'll get into those sections in a little bit. Now, the E55 W211 ran from 03 to 06, and when you see E55, specifically this body style, it means that you have the hand-built, supercharged 5.4 liter. It is 5.4, not a 5.5. Badges are just badges, but 5.4 liter supercharged V8 that makes about 469 horsepower. Whatever, sure it does. From the factory, in this iteration, it went up to about 500 in like the S classes, and then up to about 570 in the special cars like the Mercedes CLK DTM. But we're not talking about that because those are to the moon. But yeah, so specifically these cars ran from 03 to 06, and we're gonna kind of talk about quick things you should look over when you go and kind of look at one of these, or what you should expect. So let's go ahead and hop into it. Oh, first things on the list. The most important part, and honestly probably the one that could cost you the most if you don't really upkeep it, is, of course, we got to talk about it, the air suspension on these cars. These cars all have air suspension. That's how they came from the factory. The cars ride great. It rides like no other thing. It's soft. And there's also a mode where you could throw it in sports, like Sports 1, Sports 2. It'll stiffen it. It'll lower the car. Basically like a performance-oriented suspension mode. Now, a lot of people out there are like, oh, well, that's the biggest downfall. You're going to buy one of these, it's going to bankrupt you because of all the oil leaks. Well, wrong, because this is not an ABC suspension. A lot of people think that the suspension that was in the 220S class, or the SLs or the CLs, that's the ABC suspension. That's the one that works off with oil, the special fluid that you have to buy. These don't have that. That's why these are called airmatic, because they work off air. There's a compressor that sits in here that makes the shocks, fills up with air, releases air. That's how they work. Now, that also doesn't mean that they're cheap, because they're not. So the only really aftermarket solution to the stock factory ones, it's called Arnott. Arnott makes them. They're remanufactured, most of the time rebuilt, because when you buy one, they have you send in your old one. That's what they do, they rebuild them. They're kind of pricey. So for the fronts, you're looking at about $700-800 depending on where you get them from, and then the rears are a little bit cheaper, about $500, about somewhere around there. I could be wrong, don't quote me, but yeah, so they're not cheap. But guys, you guys have got to remember, like this specific car, mine, this was, what was it, $90,000 in 2004? That's like 140 grand nowadays. So this was a lot of money, and if you expect to buy one of these for 10 grand, you're just gonna drive off into the sunset. I got bad news for you. It's not gonna work. These are maintenance heavy cars. It's just, that's the rule of the game. To play the game, you gotta follow the rules, and if you don't, it's gonna leave you stranded. So first thing you gotta check, air suspension. If it's been replaced, most of them get marked on the side with date codes. If you get a pre-purchase inspection, they'll let you know if they're new. And if the owner has receipts, even better. Then you don't gotta do the research. But make sure they've been replaced, or at least make sure that the car, when you leave it for more than, I want to say maybe 24 hours, the rear, the fronts don't sag. Typically when the shock's going out, the car will sag on that shock, and it'll just leak out. Air will leak out. When you start up, it'll go back up. If it's bad enough, it won't go back up, you'll get stranded. So yeah, let's go ahead and move on to number 2 on this list. So, because I told you these cars were mated, or this thing has a 5.4 liter supercharged V8, making 469 horsepower and about 515 pound-feet of torque, something around there. This one makes a lot more, but these cars are monsters, even factory. They're just beasts. These things were faster than some sports cars of the day. And the engine's great, and they're mated to an equally reliable transmission. They're mated to what is called the 722.6. It's not a 6-speed, it's Mercedes's 5-speed that they, created in the early 90s, and it ran all the way up to 06. So it is a bulletproof transmission. It's fantastic. It shifts great. Or let me reiterate that. It shifts fine for a luxury car, not for a sports car. So if you expect to get in this car and you're gonna be dual clutch shifting, crazy going, no. That's not how this works. These are slow shifting transmissions. It's just how it is. They're old. It is what it is. Now the biggest thing you need to watch out for, it's the conductor plate. And also make sure this transmission has been serviced, because while it's bulletproof, if you don't change the oil, it'll blow up. They're not lifetime transmissions. There's no such thing as lifetime oil. So make sure you service them, or make sure it's been serviced before you buy it. Conductor plate, when it goes bad, typically the car will go in limp home mode. It may not want to shift. It may leave you in neutral, stuff like that. Other than the electrical stuff, you also have this little coupler that goes on the side of the transmission. It connects the wiring harness to the valve body. Those, they have oil rings on them, or little rubber rings. They leak. When you notice it leaking, replace it, because it could cause bigger issues. Crazy enough, the oil can travel up the wiring harness into the transmission computer and fry it, and then you're done, because then you got to go buy one. But at that point, you might as well upgrade it to a TJ Mary MK Ultra 2. Go ahead and check out my review of that video. I think it's a stellar upgrade to the factory one, but go ahead and check it out. I'll link it somewhere in this video. Now the third thing on this list, you got to be able to keep all these ponies and all this torque underneath the hood, right? Motor mounts are something that could potentially cause more issues if you let them go bad enough, or if you just let them go on. So the motor mounts are going to crack because it makes a lot of torque. The motor makes a lot of torque, and typically the rubber, so if you live in the hot area like we do in Las Vegas, the heat does not help rubber. It cracks it, dries it out, cracks it. They go bad. There's fluid in them. When they leak out, you'll see it. That's how you know they're gone bad. Or you'll feel the vibration inside from the engine when you accelerate. If you don't change motor mounts, they could actually potentially crack your headers. And at that point, you got to go buy headers, which could be a good thing, I guess, because you can upgrade to long tube headers. That's what I've done. But yeah, and motor mounts, they're not that expensive. You could get them off FCP, or I think for like 200 bucks, maybe a little bit less. But the expensive part is doing the work. If you pay a shop to do, I think it's like $1,000 labor, because it's a lot of work. You either pull the exhaust out, like you pull the cats out if you have cats. If not, you got to pull pretty much the headers out. Not the headers. You got to pull the pipes out to access them. Or you can do them at your own house. It's just a little bit more complicated. You got to jack the engine up. You got to undo the steering rack, release the steering rack. There's videos on it. You guys can check it out. But yeah, and also I know I forgot to mention on the conductor plate. At that point, FCP Euro does sell a conductor plate. Their whole kit's about 300 bucks. It's really easy to do. I have a video on the channel. You guys can check that out. I did it to this car. So yeah, let's go ahead and move on to the fourth thing on this list. So the number 4 thing, it's honestly only specific to 2003 E55s. The 04 and up cars don't have this because they remedied it. So for 03 cars, if they have the original factory radiator, they have a defect where the lines for the transmission cooler run through the radiator, and I'm not exactly sure what happens, but something cracks or something goes bad, and it'll actually suck coolant into your transmission. Now, I'm not an expert on oil or anything, but you're not supposed to mix oil and coolant. That just leads to bad things. And if you have oil, or if you have coolant in your transmission, the transmission can't shift right. It'll typically start going into limp home mode. You may even fry the clutches. If there's no oil to to kind of lube them up, you could cause a lot of problems. So if you're looking at an 03 55, make sure that's been done. I do believe it was a recall that Mercedes issued, so typically most cars have it done. But if not, if for some reason the car escaped that recall, the radiators are about 350 bucks. You just have to buy the updated one, update I think some of the line stuff, and you should be good to go. So yeah, that's number 4. Let's go ahead and move on to the final thing on this list. So the final thing you should look at, and again, like I told you guys, this is not an in-depth list. This is just a quick checklist that you can kind of look at. These cars kind of suffer from the rear subframe bushings. They'll crack, and there was a guy on one of the forums that I'm part of on Facebook. I saw it, and what happened was his bushings went bad enough to where they were gone, and the subframe actually fell out of the car. So it fell out. Of course, you got stuck, because then the wheels aren't, if your subframe falls out, everything's connected to the subframe in the back. That falls out, you're in some serious issues. So You don't want that happening. Make sure that's been done. That is a massive labor. That's a lot of work. I've seen it done once. You got to pretty much drop everything in the back, all the control arms, the shocks, because everything's connected to the subframe essentially. And then you got to drop the subframe and you buy the new bushings and you go from there. You can't go with polyurethane. That might make it a little bit rougher, but typically you just change the rubber bushings and you're good to go for another 10-15 years. Now, I don't know, I can't give you guys a price on that because I still have yet to do it on my car, but be sure there will be a video coming to that when I end up doing it. But that's the quick checklist I want you guys to look at, and I want to thank you guys all so much for checking out this video. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. Let me know down in the comments below if you guys are looking at buying one of these. These are amazing cars. I always recommend these if you're looking for a fast luxury car. This thing's a monster. It's a beautiful car, and it's actually faster than the W211 E55 that came out. And I don't care if you have one. You can't be in the comments below like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. I do. These cars are faster. I don't want to hear it. 469 horsepower is not what these cars made. Mercedes lied because they couldn't say that the cheapest supercharged car they sold was faster than their most expensive one. These cars make more power than 469. That's a lie. And they are faster than the 63. So fight me in the comments, or we can race them. We can run them. Let's go. So yeah, I hope you guys all have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take it easy.